Hello and welcome to this video tutorial on ASP.NET Core. I am doing this video tutorial and I'm making a new series on a fictitious project that I'm trying to make. I am going to call this fictitious project Academy Online. And the entire purpose of this project is to evaluate the ASP.NET Core. I know the current version now is Core 3.1, but I am going to be doing this series on ASP.NET Core 2.1. There are no significant differences. There are no significant differences between 3.1 and 2.1. Using 2.1 because of the references that I'm actually using as a study material to go through it. And this video will also serve as a note for me, so if I come back to it a couple of months from now, I can quickly evaluate some of the stuff that I may have learned. So, well, let's dive straight in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open Visual Studio. I have the Visual Studio 2017 Community Edition. It's a free version of Visual Studio, so it's really great. It has pretty much all the functionality that I need for some of this project. And when we get to a place where we don't have the capability as part of Visual Studio, we will look at other versions of Visual Studio that is available out there. But I'm pretty sure whatever we're going to be creating is definitely going to be, the Community Edition is definitely going to be able to provide other features and functionality. So to create an ASP.NET ASP.NET Core project, you click File, New, and you go to Project. And there are several things that are available here. So you can see on the web, we have the ASP Core web application. So I'm going to call this Academy Online. So that's going to be the name of our project. I'm going to put it in a dev folder, in a project folder, in a dev folder on the C drive. And my solution name will be Academy Online Solutions. So the first thing that I notice straight away is as soon as you click on the OK button, you get a second window. And on the second window, you get to choose, first of all, the version of ASP.NET Core that you want to use. So right here, you see we have 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2. I'm going to stick with the 2.1 in this project. I'm also not going to be doing the web application, the model view controller. That will be for another series that I'm going to be making later on. So I'm going to be using the web application, which is essentially just plain Razor pages. I'm quite familiar with the ASP.NET MVC and the web pages, but there has been quite a number of changes, so I'm going to try and leverage some of my previous version experience in this video as well. You will also immediately notice that you can support Docker. You can actually host and run your application in a Docker environment. I'm not going to be doing that in this video. I am, however, going to be configuring HTTPS for this web application, and that is okay because when you run your application, it would automatically self-sign your application with a certificate that you would have to install for the first time. Obviously, if you want to go production grade application, you might have to purchase a certificate and use it for this application. I'm also not going to be doing any authentication in this application at this moment. We will look at this later on. That probably requires its own video series. So I'm going to leave the default configuration, which is no authentication. So when I click on the OK button, Visual Studio will essentially go ahead and provision the project. And the first thing I see here is some sort of welcome page. So you have an overview, connected services, and publish. I'm just going to close that because we don't really need it for now. So unlike the model view controller application, you only get the pages in here. And you have a couple of pages that was provisioned for you already. Just to see what the application looks like, if I go to debug and I say start debugging, it would run the application with the boiler code that is written for us for this project. And it's just an ASP.NET Core 2.1 application with a home page, with an about page, and a couple of other pages as well is available there. One of the significant difference that I noticed with the Visual Studio 2017 Community Edition and the Professional is essentially the performance. So the Community Edition is slightly slower. I'm running 16 gig with an SSD on this machine, and I still have to wait for a lot of these processes as well. All right, so there is our Academy online application. It has a home page, and that's what we're currently looking at right now. It has an about page and it has a contact page as well. And these are all boiler page that is basically written for us. You have some useful information right here as well. You have the how-to, the overview, and the run and deploy. So when I click on the home page, I'm accessing a page called home, but you can't see it because that's the default page. But when you click on the about page, you can see that the about page would be added to the URL. Same thing applicable to the contact as well. The one thing that Visual Studio does do for you is that it automatically maps those pages to a physical page in your project. So you can see the contact pages here with the CS/HTML, but you don't see the CS/HTML, you just see the the about page and so on. So what I want to do first of all is I'm going to stop this project, and then I'm going to just examine some of those projects. So if you go to the about page, the CS/HTML, you would realize that you have this thing right at the top called the at page. This is actually what designates this page as a page model, and you will also see that there is some sort of class that is assigned to this page as well, with the add model with the lowercase, and that's very, very important later on. And what this is, and this is one of the major differences between the MVC and the Razor pages, what this really is essentially the classes that is provided for every single page. So if you expand the about page, for example, and then you can see that we have the about.cs/HTML.cs, and this is essentially the class that powers that page. So if you want anything to be displayed on your page, you can essentially put it right here, and then you will be able to access it on the page itself. So and there are several ways in which you can do that. A simple example is what you're literally looking at here. You have a string message there. So if I were to create another property, so I call this property location, could then come in here and say my location property equal to, let's say I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa. Okay, and then immediately, because this property location has now been initialized with the value, if I go to the CS/HTML page, I will be able to say put a H2 here, and I can access that property by using the at model with the capital M. And then in the at model with the capital M, you will see that I have my location there as well. So that is how you pass data from the class into the page itself. And if I were to sort of just run this without debugging, and then I navigate to the about page, you would immediately see that I was able to pass some messages. There we go. So you can see Johannesburg, South Africa is now displayed on the page as well. So we will come back and talk more about the page model and the Razor view itself. We will probably spend a lot of time, probably have a dedicated section on the course to help you learn how to use the Razor pages. So, okay, cool. Now that you have the basis, another thing that I want to just discuss here quickly before I move on is If you look at the About page that we've just talked about now, it's got a menu at the top, some sort of navigation, and a footer somewhere here. And we have some content in the middle. But if you look at the project, the page view for the About page only shows the code for the content. So all the other stuff, where did they come from? Well, it follows the regular ASP.NET structure when it comes to in the previous version of ASP.NET we used to call it master page, content page, but now it's just called the layout page. So if I click on the layout page, you see this is where all the boilerplates for the actual master page is actually located. And so what's happening is in the render body right here, when you go to any of these pages, it will be injected into the render body, and that is how you were able to display the content of each of these pages on the layout page. So to see some of the things that you can do here, I'm going to literally go in here and create an additional link. So you can see we had the home, about, and the contact. So let's say my entire online project is going to be sitting in a folder called online, and I'm going to have a student, for example. So if I hit the save button and I run this application, you will see that the link is now added on the page as well. So I'll just close this previous one. So we have the student navigation here, but obviously this is not pointing to anything as yet, so we really can't click on it. But if you want to make a razor page for this ASP.NET page with this date page directive, you can do that by creating the page directly in the pages. But if you notice, our URL here is slightly different from the default URL. That's because we wanted to keep everything relating to this application in the online folder. So I can also come in here and go to add, and then I can make a new folder, and then I can call this folder online, and then I can make my razor page in that folder as well. So I can create a new item, and I will call this razor page, and let's call this students. So obviously I am making sure it's consistent with the URL as well. So, and that's your page directive right there. You have your page model, and it's tying that page, the razor page, to the student model, which is the class. And then if you want to see if this works, you can say welcome to the student page. You can see that I'm able to just create a header tag with HTML on the razor page. And if I run this application now, that URL should be clickable, and I should be able to navigate to that page very easily. And that is essentially how simple it is to create a razor page in ASP.NET Core web pages. All right, let's do something a little more realistic with this application. So what I want to do here would be, I also want to write clean code as well. I know I could just make a folder right here in the Academy Online, and I could create all my data structure there. But you know, I want to do this right from the beginning. I think encourage most of our developers to write clean code right from the start, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that in this video tutorial as well. Okay, so one of the ways in which you write clean code is to essentially extract all your application model into a separate project, and I'm going to do that by going to the solution menu. So this is the Academy Online application. So I'm going to go to the solution menu. I'll create a new project, and I want this to be a .NET class library. So and I want to give it a name. So I'm going to call it Academy Online.core. And the reason I'm calling this the Academy Online.core is because this will be where the core data structure of the application is going to be stored, and it will be represented as classes. So essentially, you're just going to have a bunch of classes right here in this project. And don't forget, this is a class library. And then you click on the OK button. And you can see that a class.1.cs file is generated for you. So you can just delete that because we're going to be creating our own from scratch. And the one thing I immediately learned when I started playing around with ASP.NET Core 2.1 was that when you create a new project with ASP.NET Core application and you choose a version, you can see that the version is .NET Core 2.1. When I added the class library, it uses the latest version as well. And I sort of struggle a little bit to add reference to the core application from the Academy Online. So the solutions to that problem is to come here and to just change this to .NET Core 2.1. So you have consistency across your entire application. All right, so the first data structure we want to make is going to be a class that represent a student. Okay, so student.cs, and you can see how I did that. You right click, you add a new item, you go to C# item, and you click on the class, and then you type student.cs. And I want this class to be public. And then obviously what will make up a student. So I will add a couple of property here. So let's say every student will have a first name. Every student will have a last name. Every student will probably have a, that is supposed to be a string with the lowercase. So every student would have a location string as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna call this a location. And then maybe we would like to know the gender of a student as well. So here I'm just gonna say this is gonna be gender. Actually, let's just say age and do something a lot more simpler. And because at some point I might have to store this student, I will have to store the student in some sort of database, so I would need some sort of primary key representation. All right, and this is one of the things that you would have to do. In fact, when we continue further in this project, we will be looking at how to relate one model to another as well. But we can do a relationship on the basic level. So let me show you how you can do that. So let's say this student is going to be taking one or more courses, or well, I can create an enum, and I will call this enum course type. Okay, and in here I can put all the different types of courses in here that the student can attend. The student can take an engineering course, they can take a BA course, they can take a programming course, for example, and let's just add one more to this. So let's say they can take a an infrastructure course. Infrastructure, if I can spell. And then what I would love to do here would be to create another property, and I will say that this property will return a course type, and the course type, we will call this the course that the student is essentially going to be taking. So notice that I use the word course, not courses, because in this case I would want the student to be able to select one course from the list of courses as well. So this is what a typical application will look like from a relationship point of view, but we will still obviously have this done in a much more production-like. The one thing I do want to show you is Visual Studio has got really nice features now. So if you click on the enum right here, and then you use the control dot, you can see you have that pop-up there that says move types to course type.cs file. If I just press the enter on it, you can see that that course type automatically disappears, and it creates a new file in the same project as well. And it still works. So especially because we're in the same namespace, so it will be able to find the course type class as it is. Okay, so we have managed to create a data structure for our application. What you would normally do at this point in time is to create another project, and this is how will be our data access layer, maybe. Let's call it that. So you will probably call this Academy Online data, and I'm also going to make it a class library because I will be writing a bunch of classes to sort of access the database and pull out information from there. And also I'm going to delete the default class 1.cs file that is created for you, and I'm also going to go to the property of the application and change it to 2.1. That's very important, otherwise you're going to run into reference issues. Okay, so here, what I would like to do is to create an interface. We will talk about some of these patterns and design for ASP.NET a little later, but I just want to do something quickly that doesn't require database access, that would also give us information and data that we can display on our application. So I'm going to create an interface for, I'm going to call it iStudentData.cs file. And I want this interface to be public as well. And then in the interface, I want to have a method that returns IEnumerable, and this will be an IEnumerable of student. Okay, so you need reference to the student class. So for you to be able to do that, I would right-click the Academy Online and go to Add, and click on the reference, and right here I will add the academyonline.core project in our solution, so we can find it right there on the list. So when I click on the OK button, I would also want to come in here and say that in this class file I'm going to be using academyonline.core namespace. So that would immediately mean if I create an IEnumerable, you can see now that the student class is now available. I want to call this get students, and this method is how we are going to go into the database and retrieve the student information. So what I can do is, instead of connecting to the database, I just want to save you a little bit of time, and I'm going to implement some sort of local store for student. And the way that I can do that is to create another class. Let's call it student local store. All right, student local store will implement the iStudent data, and then we can use Visual Studio to help us implement this interface. And if you do that, you can see that we now have an implementation for the student method. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I'm using this student local store here to sort of provide a local implementation. In the future, if I want to connect this application to the database, I can just swipe out the implementation and do a proper implementation. That way, I will be able to sort of plug in functionalities into my applications without having to refactor the entire application as well. But don't worry about what it means right now, because we will sort of get to a place where we will talk about it. Let's go ahead in the next video, and I will show you guys how to implement a local data store that we can use and consume within our application. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.